In this step, we're going to be creating our first model, but we first need to talk a little about the relationship between the application configuration and the models that we'll be creating. In the previous step, we discussed the application level config, and in this step, we're going to be creating a model specific to an endpoint. And we've mentioned previously that this model is going to be starting off as an empty file. This is part of LoRa's conventions. So what's the relationship between this empty file and the application config? And to answer that question, we can actually take a look at CSS. So CSS uses this concept of cascading overrides. So if I define a style for paragraph and I specify the color as black and the font size as 14 pixels, and then I create another style that's more specific. So I say paragraph text that also has the class of error, and I specify a color of red. The error text for paragraphs is actually the combination of the set of first styles overridden by the more specific styles. And so we end up with paragraph text that is red and has a font size of 14 pixels. So this is the same relationship that LoRa uses between the application configuration and individual models. So even though the model we're going to be creating is going to start off as empty, it's actually a final configuration that is the combination of the configuration specified in models along with any environment overrides, combined with any specific configuration settings you've set for that model. And so this model is going to override your application configurations, and this allows it to inherit behavior that's common and then specify a behavior that's more specific. And so it's this behavior that allows the conventions to start off with an empty file, but still provide meaningful actions and reducers because it's inheriting behavior and settings that you've already specified for the application itself. So with that, let's create our tweet model and see this in action. To generate a model in LoRa, we're going to use the CLI again. And if we type LoRa generate, you'll see a list of things that LoRa can generate. And among that list, one of the things is a model. So to look at how it works, we can type LoRa generate model. We can see that the full syntax is generate model and then the model name. So we want to generate a tweet. So I'm going to say LoRa generate model tweet and hit enter. And we get this message that tells us that a new tweet was created at source models tweet.js. So I'm going to go into source and I'm going to open up models and look at this tweet. And when you open this tweet up, you're going to see a lot of commented out code. So things like the ID attribute or the initialize method, these are a lot of the things that you may need to override in your application to address specific concerns related to your behavior or the API endpoints you're dealing with. And so these are exposed here as a convenience so that you don't have to copy paste them out of the documentation. Now with this model created, we have a lot of functionality available to us right now. So let's flip over to our application to demonstrate that. So we're going to start by refreshing the page to make sure our model's loaded. And then I'm going to open up the developer tools. And we're going to take a look at the console. So if you type LoRa into the console, you'll see that there is a list of things that are exposed on it by default. And this is the object that you can use within the code. So the thing we're going to look at right now is LoRa actions. And so these are all the actions that are in the application. And after we created our tweet model, we have tweet as that as an object, a model on actions, and we have options for create, destroy, finding, getting, and updating tweets. So we're going to use one of these methods to demonstrate this actually works. So let's flip over to our API and let's take a look at the data, and we can see that one of these tweets here, we'll just pull one out. So this one that has an ID of 1337. So one of these actions is going to actually get a tweet with an ID, and that's this get method. So to demonstrate this, we're going to say LoRa.actions.tweet get, and we're going to pass in 1337. And when I hit enter, you'll notice a network request actually went out to tweet/1337, and we'll flip over to the network tab and take a look at that. So if I click on this, we have a URL that's what we expected. So we said get this ID, and it transforms that into tweets/1337 for the appropriate ID. And if we click on preview, we can see that we have the data that came back from the server. So if we flip back over to the console, this didn't just make the network request, but it also saves the tweet we just fetched in the store state. And so to look at that, we can access the Redux store from lore.store, and we can call get state. And so this will tell us everything about the application state currently. And so after creating the model for tweet, we now have this reducer state associated with this reducer for tweets, and we're storing tweets sort of by ID. There's one that keeps track of them by CID, and so if we open this by ID, we can see that there is a tweet with an ID of 1337, and this is our data structure. So here's the data that came back from the server, and we have an ID. The state is marked as resolved. There's nothing in the error field because there wasn't an error. And so just by creating that empty file, we had the ability to fetch tweets and store tweets, and now they'd be available to us in the application if we need them. So in the next step, we're going to learn how to connect our components to this data so that we can request data and be provided it through props.